I knew something was off the second I saw his smug little reflection in the Zoom waiting room window. Connor Wade, our new VP of Operations, a man with all the charm of a DMV line and half the emotional intelligence. Hired 3 weeks ago after what I assume was a vigorous pillow fight at some fratty golf retreat, he'd already alienated half the compliance team, used synergy wrong in a company-wide email, and requested a private parking spot, despite living 3 blocks from the office. But nothing prepared me for what he did next. Linda, he said, not even a hello. We need to talk about your attire during the Fremont site visit. I blinked. My attire? He sighed like I'd spilled grape juice on his mother's urn. Yes, the slacks, they weren't regulation compliant. And the shoes, open-toed, which is a direct violation of updated Protocol 14B. I stared. Connor, I've been wearing that same site gear for 6 years. Approved by legal. It's literally in the onboarding binder. He leaned back, lacing his fingers like he was about to drop a TED talk. We're tightening standards. Optics matter. And frankly, this isn't negotiable. Effective immediately, you're dismissed. No HR rep, no paper trail. Just a man in a $90 shirt trying to cosplay as authority. Firing a 15-year federal clearance holder over the fact that my ankles offended him. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't even log off right away. I just stared at him like I was trying to figure out what species had learned to speak. And then, calmly, I reached over and closed my laptop. Let me pause for a sec, if you're still here listening. You've ever been blindsided by some clipboard-toting ladder climber who thinks power comes from parking spots instead of people? Hit the like button. Maybe even subscribe. Not just for me, but because 90% of you don't, and honestly, it's the only thing keeping my story from getting buried under some AI-generated podcast about stoicism and crypto. This one's real, and trust me, it only gets messier from here. Back to my kitchen. It was silent, the kind of silence that usually means grief or rage or dread. But for me, it was clarity. I took off my ID badge, slid it into a drawer next to my kid's old Nintendo DS. Then I opened my work notebook, still full of flagged contract sections, vendor audits, and the current compliance draft for the Department of Energy partnership set to kick off the next morning. $150 million. Government contract. Security clearance level 3A. I was the only named security agent on file, and I just got fired by a man who couldn't spell subcontractor without a whiteboard and a team of interns. I didn't rage. I didn't throw my phone. I didn't blast emails or print receipts. What I did was simple. I poured a glass of cranberry juice, sat down, and opened a secure folder on my personal drive. It held every notarized copy of my federal clearance, every Department of Energy correspondence, and one very juicy fact: clearance isn't transferable. You can't just replace the named agent like a printer cartridge. They needed me to show up at that meeting tomorrow, and now they had a Connor instead. I copied the essentials to my legal archive. I made no noise, no status update, no warning shot. Then I shut down my laptop and texted one person, Maya, my old analyst who left last year for another job after Connor publicly called her too intense for vendor-facing roles. She sent back, I heard. Are you okay? I replied, I will be. Then I turned off my phone. The night outside my window stretched long and calm like the slow inhale before a detonation. Somewhere downtown, Trivanta Systems was finishing up its prep for the most important contract of the fiscal year. And I was the clearance. They just didn't know it yet. I slept like a stone in a river, still on the outside, but moving under the surface. No dreams, no tossing, just quiet inertia. Because when you've worked in federal compliance for 15 years, the kind of quiet that comes after betrayal doesn't feel like stillness, it feels like sorting. Sorting every file in your brain, every policy clause you ever memorized, every meeting where someone said, you're the only reason this place hasn't gone nuclear. At 6:12 a.m., I brewed coffee like I was prepping for war. Not dramatic, just deliberate. The kind of ritual you do when you know you're holding something no one else understands yet. I took my laptop into the sunroom, cracked open the secure side of my drive, and typed in the 12-digit encryption key they made us memorize during clearance onboarding. I hadn't used it in 2 years. My fingers still knew it cold. Inside that folder sat the real crown jewels of Trivanta Systems, not code, not schematics, not performance metrics. No, what I had was better. I had every file that tied me, Linda Diane Brooks, to the Department of Energy's subcontractor authorization system, the official NSAR registry, and right there in black and white bureaucratese was the line that made my pulse slow: named security agent of record, Linda D. Brooks, effective through March 31, 2027. Clearance type: Tier 3A, Federal Designation Linked Contract, DOE Joint Ops Agreement #120,34801. Name: 1 slot, not transferable, not replicable. If you want to change it, you go through a 6-month rescreening and resubmission process, assuming you can even find someone else with the necessary clearance and matching employment record. Connor Wade had fired me. He hadn't replaced me, and he didn't know what he'd erased. I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile. What I did was download 3 notarized PDFs, scan them for metadata to make sure nothing had been tampered with, and port them into my personal legal archive with timestamp backups. I never touched a company file, never deleted a line of code, never sent a single email to myself. Because real leverage doesn't live in screenshots and snarky Slack threads. It lives in silence, legal silence, documented silence, bulletproof bureaucratic silence. By 6:47 a.m., my kitchen smelled like toast and vindication. I fed my cat, Daisy, who was too busy slapping her water bowl to care about corporate treason. I pulled on an old college sweatshirt and opened my personal inbox, where the only new message was from a former teammate, Tanya, the same one who used to cover for me during those 12-hour audit marathons when we were still crawling our way up the ladder. Her subject line was just one word, seriously. I clicked it. Inside, you okay? Heard through Maya. What the actual hell? I stared at the blinking cursor for a full minute. Then I typed, I will be, not I'm fine, not thanks for checking. Just I will be, because I knew exactly how this was going to go down. In about 3 hours, Trivanta's executive team would welcome the Department of Energy's lead audit team for their $150 million kickoff. There would be a photo op, donuts catered by some overpaid PR intern, and Connor would be strutting around like a show dog in a new leash. And then, someone in a blue jacket with a government badge would ask for the verbal confirmation from the named security agent. And Connor, who had fired that agent 23 hours ago because her shoes were non-compliant, was going to learn what the phrase contract breach under Federal Clause 7.3 actually meant. The beauty of the system is that it doesn't care about office politics. It doesn't care about dress codes or personality clashes or how many LinkedIn followers your VP has. The clearance protocol is law, and law doesn't blink. I checked the time, 7:06 a.m. Trivanta had less than 2 hours to discover what it feels like when the woman they thought was disposable turns out to be the one person holding their entire federal authorization together with 3 PDFs, a badge they never deactivated, and the patience of someone who knew this day was coming the moment she hit leave meeting. I closed the laptop. Let them smile for their kickoff. Let them pose for the camera. Let them believe their show was ready. Because backstage, the foundation was already gone. The boardroom at Trivanta HQ looked like it had been staged by someone who thought the government awarded contracts based on how well you coordinated lanyards with balloon arches. A faux polished display of corporate hospitality. Bottled water in glass instead of plastic, pastry towers no one would touch, and glossy welcome packets stacked like ammunition. Projector looped a muted slideshow, Trivanta XDO, Partnership for Progress. They even had a sign outside the elevator that said security cleared guests only, which would have been cute if it weren't about to implode their entire operation. Connor Wade strutted around in a blazer that still had the sleeve tag on it. He greeted every Department of Energy staffer like he just invented electricity. Welcome, welcome, he beamed, holding out his hand like a game show host. Today marks a new chapter for us all. He hadn't slept, you could tell. There was a manic sheen to him, sweaty confidence that only came from over-rehearsing lines in front of a bathroom mirror. He waved at the cameras, posed with the head of external contracts, even patted a junior compliance associate on the shoulder like he knew his name. He didn't. That poor associate, Brian, maybe, or Brandon, looked like someone had stapled anxiety to a dress shirt. He hovered near the name badge printer, flipping through the stack, brow furrowed. He pulled one card out, then another, double-checking the alphabetized list on the wall. Sir, he finally said, approaching Connor as discreetly as a man carrying a bomb. We're still missing the verbal verification packet for the security clearance. The agent of record file? Connor rolled his eyes so hard it's a miracle they didn't dislocate. Handled, he said, brushing it off like a smudge on his ego. It's updating the files. It's routine. Stop fretting. Right, but Brendan, look around. Connor cut him off, gesturing like a magician about to pull failure out of a hat. Do I look worried? No, because we're buttoned up. Let's not spook the guests with internal paperwork chatter. His badge read, Connor Wade VP Ops. Brandon's badge just said Brandon. No title, no clearance level, no hope. Meanwhile, in the background, the department head of legal liaison tapped on her laptop, her frown deepening by the minute. A silent email war had erupted between legal and compliance. Subject lines read, missing doc chain, NSAR file still not synced, need verbal ID ASAP. No one said Linda's name, not once, not out loud, but that didn't mean she wasn't there. She was everywhere, in the gaps, in the unsigned forms, in the systems that wouldn't greenlight final authorization because the backend couldn't reconcile her absence. Her name was a ghost in every line of code. A hole no one thought to fill, because you know what happens in offices like Trivanta? When a woman has been doing her job so thoroughly for so long, she disappears. Not an incompetence, inefficiency. She becomes infrastructure, and infrastructure is invisible until it's gone. Linda's badge wasn't printed, not because she was an oversight, but because they assumed she was replaceable. They thought they could swap her out like a light bulb and the power would keep flowing. Meanwhile, across the city, Linda sat on her balcony in a sweatshirt older than Connor's career, sipping coffee as the news played softly from the TV inside. A red banner scrolled across the bottom. Doe officials arrive at Trivanta HQ for $150M contract kickoff. She didn't flinch, didn't blink, just scrolled her phone until her eyes caught something unexpected, a LinkedIn notification. Connor Wade has posted, "Big day at Trivanta." Proud to lead the team into a bold new chapter, she chuckled. It wasn't cruel. It was maternal almost, like watching a toddler run headfirst into a screen door, because she knew what was coming. This wasn't a revenge plot. It wasn't sabotage. It was just letting gravity do its thing. Connor had cut the rope. Now the fall was free and inevitable. Back at HQ, the DUI's assistant project manager asked to review the clearance log one last time. Just a formality, she said, flipping pages. The final sheet was missing the verbal verification signature. The line where Linda's name should have been was blank. Brandon whispered, "Should I call someone?" Connor, now visibly sweating, hissed back, "No. I told you, handled, handled." In 23 minutes, that word would become his epitaph. Building buzzed like a microwaved beehive, nervous energy cloaked in cheap cologne and fresh printer toner. At exactly 9 a.m., 3 unmarked government vehicles pulled into the front lot, and you'd think the Pope himself had arrived based on the way Connor straightened his blazer and barked at the intern to adjust the podium height. The Department of Energy's federal audit team didn't need introductions. They had badges. Suits tailored for utility over vanity. Calm faces, clipboards. One woman with a gray streak in her hair and a stare so sharp it could cut through quarterly projections. You didn't talk unless they asked you to. You didn't improvise. You didn't get cute. Connor got cute. "Welcome, welcome," he chirped, practically oozing artificial authority. Connor Wade, VP of Operations, proud to represent Trivanta Systems on this historic day. His handshake was too long. His smile was too wide. You could smell the desperation under the citrus aftershave. The auditors nodded politely, already scanning the perimeter like wolves in a lamb costume party. Behind the scenes, the real descent had begun. In the legal bullpen, 2 floors up and 1 Slack channel deep, a paralegal named Shauna was trying very hard not to panic. She'd just run the final clearance file export to prep the digital audit trail and came up empty on the most important document in the deck, the updated NSAR record. No named security agent on file, no transfer request submitted, no override confirmation. The most recent line item was dated 8 months prior. Linda D. Brooks active, that was it. No termination, no revocation, no successor. Shauna triple-checked the timestamp, then emailed legal lead. "Sorry to be a pest, but should we have a termination form or new NSAR entry for the DUI deal? System still shows LDB as active." Legal lead replied 5 minutes later, "What the hell is an NSAR?" In the break room, someone dropped a tray of espresso shots. It barely registered. Downstairs, Connor was giving the same canned speech he'd rehearsed all week, something about operational synergy and shared integrity values. The auditors listened. Impressed, one of them wrote something down, probably talks too much. Then came the walkthrough. The audit team fanned out like tactical analysts, checking floor security, badge checkpoints, file access logs, workstation cleanliness, even USB port status. This was more than ceremony. This was certification. No clearance, no contract. No contract, no company. In the server room, one auditor paused at the digital logbook. He scrolled again. "Is there a reason the NSAR clearance file hasn't been updated since March?" He asked quietly, not accusatory, just interested, which was always worse. The IT supervisor blanched. "We thought Ops had submitted the changeover." "Who was the previous clearance holder?" The IT guy looked like he just remembered he left the stove on. Linda Brooks." The auditor nodded slowly. "Still says she's the only one authorized." Another check mark. Another silence. Meanwhile, Connor was leading the final photo op in the glass foyer. He had one hand in his pocket like a wannabe statesman and the other gesturing toward nothing in particular as he babbled about strategic realignment. At that exact moment, legal's Slack thread lit up like a house fire. No updated file found. "Clearance still under Brooks. Is she here today?" "No. Fired yesterday." VP said it's fine. "Who signed the 7.3 clause acknowledgement?" "No one." Connor waved it. He can't waive federal clauses. On the second floor, legal lead stood up without a word and walked to compliance. Her shoes echoed like gunshots on linoleum. She leaned into the director's office and whispered 5 words that cracked the room open like a fault line. "We never replaced the clearance." Back downstairs, the head auditor walked over to Connor, now mid-monologue about streamlined vendor pathways. "Mr. Wade," she said crisply, "ready for pre-verification. Please provide access to the named security agent for verbal confirmation." Connor blinked, smile frozen in place. Yes, absolutely. They're just reviewing some final materials." She nodded, "We'll wait," and then she said nothing. Just stood there, still, like a countdown in human form. Connor turned, stiff-legged, and walked toward the stairwell. He didn't look at anyone, didn't wave, just kept moving, as if proximity to his own staff might infect him with the consequences. In the glass reflection, he saw his face, tight, pale, cracking at the edges. For the first time that morning, Connor Wade looked like a man who realized he'd fired the only person keeping the foundation from collapsing, and the walls were starting to hum. The pre-brief took place in Conference Room Delta, which someone in marketing had transformed into a beige panic room. Every chair was perfectly spaced. The table had been wiped down so many times it gleamed like a dental mirror. A laminated itinerary sat at each place setting, along with a branded pen and a tiny bottle of Trivanta clean hand sanitizer, because nothing says government-grade preparedness like lemon-scented ethanol and an inspirational slogan on the label. Connor sat at the head of the table, flanked by the general counsel, the head of compliance, and someone from HR who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else, including a dentist's chair or hell itself. Across from them sat the DOE audit team, 4 people, 1 binder, 0 smiles. These were not let's figure it out together people. These were we have protocol and probable cause people. The lead auditor, the one with the gray streak and a voice like fine sandpaper, opened the binder slowly, like she was flipping through someone's fate. She scanned the pages. Each turn was like a tick on a stopwatch. Environmental clearance, check. Data infrastructure protocols, check. Cybersecurity posture, check. Then she stopped, page 42. Her brow tightened. This is missing the NSA sign-off, she said plainly. Connor smiled, too big, too toothy. The kind of smile you paste on when you feel a noose made of policy tightening around your throat. I'm sure that's just a clerical error, he said. We'll get that updated. She didn't look up. We need live verbal confirmation. Now, the air in the room thinned. You could feel it, that slow, suffocating kind of silence that happens when someone drops a grenade but hasn't pulled the pin yet. The PR team standing just outside the glass doors went still. Phones lowered. Smiles froze mid-frame. Connor cleared his throat. Of course, it's just that our current clearance liaison is who? She interrupted, finally looking up. Her eyes weren't unkind, just precise, because the file still lists Linda Brooks. No amendment submitted, no replacement processed. That makes her the sole named security agent, and under Clause 7.3 that confirmation has to be verbal and direct, or this contract doesn't launch. Behind Connor, General Counsel blanched so hard she went 2 shades paler than her blouse. Compliance lead shifted in his seat like someone had tied his belt too tight. HR rep opened their mouth, closed it again, and pretended to read the itinerary like it held answers. It didn't. Connor leaned forward, voice softening. I'm sure we can work through this. Our team has been doing a phenomenal job. This is not a performance review, Mr. Wade, the auditor cut in. This is a federal security audit. Your clearance file is incomplete. Your signatory is absent. We need her. Now, Connor looked down at the binder, then at the door, then at the glass wall where the press team had started to back away, one step at a time. The silence that followed wasn't dramatic, it was bureaucratic. Worse than drama. Drama can be salvaged. Bureaucracy, that's policy, that's stone. That's the sound of wheels already grinding forward, chewing up everything in their path. I'll make a call, he mumbled, standing abruptly. The auditor didn't move. We'll wait 10 minutes. After that, we issue a pause notice. Of course, Connor muttered, already halfway to the hallway. The moment the door shut behind him, General Counsel turned to compliance. You told me you filed the change, she snapped. We thought Connor had it, he whispered back. He told us he was tightening standards. We didn't even get her termination papers. Jesus Christ, she said under her breath. You mean she's still active in the system? Compliance nodded. Slowly. General Counsel exhaled like she was trying not to hyperventilate. Then technically, she's still the only federally authorized signatory on this deal. From across the room, the auditor's assistant pulled out a federal binder of her own. She flipped to the page marked Emergency Revocation Procedures and set it deliberately on the table. Outside, the hallway felt like a fever dream. Connor stood in front of his office door, hands shaking, scrolling through his phone for Linda's number, except he didn't have it. He'd never bothered to save it. Why would he? She was just the woman he fired over Zoom because her shoes didn't match his hallucination of professionalism. He turned to the HR rep trailing behind him. Get me her contact file. It's been deactivated, they stammered. IT already pulled her badge access this morning. Connor's voice dropped to a whisper. Then how the hell do we reach her? The HR rep looked away. We can't. And in that moment, the full blistering weight of what he'd done sank in, not as a concept, not as a technicality, but as a tangible consequence. Linda Brooks wasn't just gone. She was the foundation, and he'd kicked her out like garbage. In conference room Delta, the lead auditor checked her watch. 7 minutes left. The door creaked open like it was ashamed of the sound. Connor slithered back into the room looking like a man who'd been caught shoplifting confidence. The skin beneath his eyes was a shade grayer, his collar wilted at the edges. His swagger had dried up somewhere between HR's, we don't have her number, and it's you asked us to delete her profile yesterday. He walked back to the head of the table, nodded weakly at the auditors, as if the past 10 minutes hadn't just rewritten the company's future in invisible ink. Apologies for the delay. Believe we can move forward now, the lead auditor raised a hand. Not rude, just final. We'll resume the confirmation process, she said. Then she lifted a single page from her binder, adjusted her glasses, and began reading from it aloud like a priest performing a last rite. Per Section 7.3 of the Federal Subcontractor Clearance Mandate, verbal confirmation must be obtained from the named security agent on record. Today, that record lists one. She paused just enough for the wait to settle. Linda Brooks. The room turned to granite. The legal team flinched like someone had just fired a gun into the ceiling. Connor forced a smile that looked like it had been assembled by a drunk taxidermist. She's no longer with the company. The auditor didn't blink. Then the contract is non-compliant. You can't proceed. Silence fell so violently it felt like sound had been banned. The PR team outside froze mid-frame, their iPhones lowering in slow horror. Somewhere, an air vent kicked on with the gravity of a funeral march. One of the senior execs leaned in toward legal and whispered, "What does that mean?" The lead auditor heard him anyway. "It means," she said, turning her gaze to the entire table, "you fired the only person who could legally authorize the launch of this agreement." She closed the binder with a soft thud that somehow made everyone flinch. "You needed her. She was the clearance." Connor's mouth opened, but nothing useful came out, just syllables that smelled like guilt and desperation. I thought the position could be reassigned internally," he stammered. HR was reviewing a new candidate. The named security agent role is non-transferable without federal recertification. 6-month process minimum. If the previous agent is terminated and no override is filed, the designation becomes dormant. Legally inert. The auditor's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Your contract is now on pause pending reauthorization. General counsel dropped her pen. It rolled across the table like punctuation. Connor tried again, voice cracking. "But we submitted." "No, Mr. Wade," the auditor interrupted, for the first time using his name like a guillotine. "You didn't submit anything. In fact, your internal portal shows the last administrative update was 8 months ago. You deactivated the wrong thing. You deactivated your compliance lifeline." One of the federal assistants began quietly packing up the audit binder. Another typed something into a laptop. A red banner slid across the screen. Contract status. Suspended clearance incomplete. The PR team outside started moving away, a slow-motion retreat. One woman took off her press badge and slipped it into her purse like the whole event was radioactive. Connor sat back in his chair like he'd been pushed there. His face sagged in stages, arrogance first, then denial, then the dawning awareness that this wasn't a bad meeting. This was a career postmortem, a professional obituary being written in real time. "I don't understand," he whispered, more to himself than anyone. "It was just a dress code thing." She wore open-toed shoes. The lead auditor stood, collecting her binder. "She wore clearance, Mr. Wade. You fired her without understanding what she was." With that, she nodded once to the room and walked out. Connor didn't stand, didn't speak. The rest of the room stayed frozen, executives, attorneys, HR, compliance, all of them staring at the smoking crater where $150 million used to be. All of them realizing, too late, that Linda Brooks hadn't just worn the clearance. She was the clearance, and now she was gone. The rest of the day played out like a slow-motion autopsy, each department peeling back another layer of failure, one memo at a time. It started with legal. Within minutes of the audit team's exit, their entire floor was vibrating with frantic mouse clicks and whispered curses. Paralegals hunched over keyboards, frantically digging through email chains. Compliance sat slack-jawed, staring at a shared spreadsheet that now might as well have been a confession letter. A junior attorney broke into tears in the unisex bathroom. Someone tried to make a joke about Dressgate and was met with the kind of silence that could crack drywall. On the executive floor, Connor was summoned to Conference Room C, Trivanta's unofficial panic bunker. He was flanked by general counsel, 2 board members, and a grim-faced consultant from external risk. The door closed behind him with a finality usually reserved for courtrooms and confessionals. He didn't come out for 30 minutes. When he did, he looked like something that had been boiled in regret. His blazer was unbuttoned. His tie had migrated sideways. He wasn't speaking, just nodding to no one in particular as he walked directly to his office, grabbed a single manila folder, and vanished into the stairwell. By 3:11 p.m., HR had quietly deleted the Slack post that had welcomed him just 3 weeks earlier. "Join us in welcoming Connor Wade to the Trivanta family." It was gone. So was his bio from the company website, archived faster than a lunch receipt. His nameplate disappeared from the directory, like he'd never existed. The PR team was told to stand down. The press kit was pulled. All scheduled interviews canceled. The Department of Energy sent over an official pause notice, a bland little email with the emotional impact of a wrecking ball. Trivanta's comms team stared at it like it was radioactive. The notice was simple. 3 lines. Subject, contract 120,348. Status, suspended pending security compliance review. Action, do not proceed with onboarding, integration, or PR materials. Somewhere in finance, someone began drafting internal models for what would happen if the deal collapsed entirely. Spoiler, it wasn't pretty. Stock options would die first. Vendor partnerships would pull back next. Then came hiring freezes, spending reviews, and eventually the death spiral nobody said out loud, but but everyone tasted in the air like a metal aftershock. At 4:22 p.m., the head of IT pushed out a system reconciliation alert to all department heads. It included a bullet point that read, "Named security agent. System shows inactive override. Replacing NSAR requires 90 to 120-day federal processing. Currently, no valid security agent on file." The reply chain beneath it turned into a digital scream. One person wrote, "Can we just rehire her?" Another answered, "She'd have to reapply. And she's already flagged as separated in FedSys. We'd need an act of Congress." Someone from vendor relations just typed, "Holy shit." By 5:06 p.m., the lobby plants had been removed to streamline optics. No one knew what that meant, no one asked. Facilities just started quietly stripping anything that felt like hope. Inside the compliance war room, a whiteboard now held the phrase NSA GAP root cause, personnel decision in red expo marker. Below it, a list of next steps, all crossed out one by one as legal confirmed how many layers of federal red tape now wrapped around their future. Linda's name, still listed in the system, still holding the lock, but nobody dared say it out loud anymore. Not out of anger, out of awe. Because what they realized slowly, painfully, was that this woman they dismissed over a dress code didn't fight them, didn't sue, didn't yell. She simply walked away and took the skeleton key with her. System didn't collapse with a bang. It didn't need to. It unraveled like a spool of policy thread, quiet and devastating. And by the end of the day, Trivanta had a $150 million pile of ambition, a gutted leadership team, and one open question scribbled across 3 departments. Who's going to call her? No one volunteered. The email came through just after 6:30 a.m. the next morning, encrypted, clean, and quiet, like a gentle knock on a steel door. Linda was pouring her second cup of coffee, same old chipped mug she'd had since her second year at Trivanta, the one with the faded quote on the side, "I'm not bossy, I'm just aggressively helpful." She smiled when she saw the sender, Jay Weathers at Govstrat Partners Com, a name she recognized. Department liaison, old school, didn't deal in nonsense. She clicked once, entered her security phrase, and watched the message unfold like a silk map. "Miss Brooks, hope this finds you well. In light of recent developments regarding Contract 120,340 ADA and your current status, we'd like to explore a consulting engagement with you. Independent contractor status. Tier 3A maintained. Scope, oversight support and compliance continuity for DOE subcontractor projects across 3 regions. Compensation, $315/HR, variable depending on duration. Timeline, immediate, you set the start date. One condition requested, 0 interaction with Trivanta systems, past or present. Let us know where to send the onboarding packet. J. Weathers, lead liaison, Federal Strat Partners Group. No fluff, no desperation. Just respect in document form." Linda didn't gloat. She didn't dance in the kitchen or text her former coworkers with smug emojis. That wasn't her way. Vindication didn't have to be loud. It could be quiet and paid. She clicked download packet. The offer letter opened with her name in bold. The terms were generous. The clause she requested was honored without question. Non-conflict clause 4.7. Engagement excludes any coordination with Trivanta systems or affiliated subsidiaries. It was the first time in 15 years her name had been listed above the title. She took her stylus from the drawer, signed with a flick of her wrist, not because she needed revenge, because she earned peace. Her phone buzzed with a new notification. LinkedIn, Connor Wade's profile has been updated, former VP Trivanta Systems. She didn't click it. Instead, she opened her onboarding dashboard. New assignments, new calendar, new clearance confirmation this time, not as a cog, but as a partner. Her role? Primary Security Liaison, Federal Energy Oversight, Multi-State Program. Same clearance, better pay, no dress code. From the window, morning sunlight poured in across the floor, catching the edges of the new badge she'd just been issued, shipped overnight with a gold trim on the side and no company logo. Just her name. Linda D. Brooks, clearance intact, reputation sharpened, and Trivanta. They weren't even a footnote in her future. Not anymore. Her silence wasn't compliance. It was calculation. And now it was compensation. The photo made its way through the compliance grapevine just before noon. Grainy, taken from someone's phone through the glass partition of Trivanta's executive wing. But even blurry, the details were unmistakable. Connor's office, lights off, chair missing. That ridiculous motivational poster about discipline equals freedom peeled halfway off the wall. 2 facilities workers stood mid-motion, hauling out a box filled with what looked like a mug, a Rolodex, and a deflated leather planner that had once screamed, "I'm in charge." No plaque, no goodbyes, no press release. Just the quiet erasure of a name from a space that no longer had a purpose. Linda didn't bother to zoom in. She'd seen it enough times in her career. Cleanup phase, the aftermath of hubris. Connor's fall wasn't dramatic, it was procedural, cold, the way real consequences usually unfold, not with a bang but with a form signed in triplicate and an access badge that stops working before lunch. She set her phone face down and returned her focus to what actually mattered, her new onboarding packet spread across her kitchen table in soft morning light. No branding, no slogans, just clean typography, clear assignments, and a direct link to the Federal Energy Task Force portal, where her name now lived at the top of the org chart under a new title: Primary Security Liaison, Federal Energy Task Force, Multi-State Division. It wasn't flashy, but it was powerful, and it came without anyone scrutinizing her shoes. The onboarding tasks were simple: confirm clearance, review current assignments, meet with senior liaisons via secure call at 3 p.m. Her workspace was whatever she chose it to be. Her hours, flexible; her rate, twice what she earned at Trivanta, and without the migraine of pretending to respect people like Connor Wade. She looked out the window. The sky was wide open, not metaphorically, just real, blue and unsupervised. A dog barked somewhere. Her neighbor's wind chime danced in the breeze like it had no idea it was sharing air with quiet revenge. Her laptop pinged once more. System alert from the DOE portal. You have been added to Task Force thread. Compliance Strategy Energy Security Audit queue for another ping. Status, authorized Tier 3A. There it was. Authority that couldn't be undermined by bad judgment in a Zoom call. Power that didn't scream, it just moved things, quietly, efficiently, permanently. She clicked acknowledge. Then she closed the laptop, leaned back in her chair, and let it wash over her. Not joy, not even satisfaction, just stillness. The rare kind that only shows up when the noise stops, when you've defended nothing and still won everything. And somewhere, maybe in a Slack channel that had long since turned into a mausoleum of unspoken regrets, someone at Trivanta was probably asking, how did this happen? The answer was simple: they fired the clearance. She just waited for the system to realize it. Linda picked up her stylus one last time that morning, jotted down a note to review the new multi-state clearance protocols by Thursday, then sat back and smiled, not wide, not smug, just enough. Her final thought came uninvited, barely a whisper. But it lingered, clear as a signature. You fired me over a dress code. I rewrote your clearance protocol. And with that she stood. No applause, no retribution speech, no parting shot, because the truth was already echoing louder than any words she could have said. She didn't fight loud. She didn't need to. She just left the room and let the silence do the damage. Thanks for watching, you cubicle warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the coffee pot strikes again.